Okay. Today we'll be learning a Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Nun Hey and Beis. I'll just start from the beginning of the page again. There may have been some technical errors yesterday, which things weren't recorded. So, this is the Mishnah, and it's not noising carefully here, Divrei Reb Meir, that when you come to measure the tchum of the city, you measure it you begin to measure the tchum, the 2,000 amas, from outside the city, 70 2/3 amas. That's where you begin to measure the city. This is the size of what's considered a karfa. Chacham say that this din of karfev is not something from where that the karfev is you can start measuring the tchum Shabbos from after the size of the karfev. The karfev is something which, if you have the space of a karfev between both cities, so then both cities are considered as one city, and therefore it's considered as one city. So if it's considered as one city, so then that is considered. If it's considered one city, then the whole city is considered like Dalet Amas. So you don't have to count the length of the city as part of the Tchum Shabbos. Just counts as Arba Amas. Just one word or two about this karfev. This karfev is a measurement of 70 2/3 amma, which is basically because if you have a square area which is 70, each side is 70 2/3 amma, so you end up with 5,000 square ammas. The square root of 5,000 is 70 2/3. And the area of the chotzer of the Mishkan, which was 50 amas by 100 amas, is 5,000 square amas. In other words, it's the area of the Mishkan, but in the form of a square, not in the form of a rectangle. That is the measurement of karfev. And the concept of karfev would be that you're saying, the karfev is like the courtyard or part of the yard. So it would be an extension so to speak. There's no real courtyard over there, but such an area which is 70 amas and 2/3. So this area is considered an extension of the buildings or whatever it is, and therefore you have these opinions. So according to Reb Meir, like was mentioned before, the Tchum Shabbos starts after that, because that's part of the courtyards or the chotzer of the, let's say, of the city. Or according to Chachamim, no, you can't usually you start from the edge of the cities where you start, but certainly if between an area of two cities where there's a gap between two cities, if the gap is so small that you have a karfev in between them, less than a karfev in between them, so that karfev is considered, it's just a bit of a courtyard and not so significant, and therefore it's considered as one city. Okay. So that was a bit about the concept of karfev. The Itmer, Rav Huna Omar, karfev l'zu, karfev l'zu. Now, Rav Huna said, when the Chachamim say karfev, it means that you don't have one karfev between both cities. Even if you have, each city is allowed to have its own karfev, and which ends up to be like 141 and something amas. So if you have that space between the two cities, the 141 amas, that is considered one city. So that's the opinion of Rav Huna. He argues and says that even both cities you only have one sort of courtyard between. Anyway, but let's go back to the words of Rav Huna, and that is where we sort of finishing off. This Mishnah is brought in as a question. The Mishnah is brought in as a question to what before we had a statement on the other side of the Omer. We had a statement from from Rav Huna that if you have a city and the city was it was destroyed, the middle of the city was destroyed, then so if the middle of the city was destroyed, leaving the two sides of the city, and so are they considered two cities or one city? So Rabbi Huna said over there that if the distance between the two parts of the city which remain are less than 141 amas, then it's considered one city. If it's more than 141 amas, then it's considered two cities. So the question which the Gemara asked, that we have twice Rabbi Huna is saying the same halacha. Why is it necessary for Rabbi Huna to say the halacha in two different scenarios? And the Gemara is going to answer. The Gemara says, you need to have, Rabbi Huna needs to tell us this halacha about two karfos. That's the measurement, whether it's considered one city or two cities. That's he needs to tell us in both instances. The Iyashmin and Hocha, he would say it only in the case of the Hocha means the Gemara, which we were talking about, which is on the other side of the page, that the city which was destroyed through the middle is. So I would say there you're more lenient to havalate sad hekem hetem ikara, since originally it was one city. So in reality it was one city. So therefore, and it was mutter. This whole city, both ends originally were just considered dal damas. So therefore, you can have two karfos in the middle, and it's still considered, even though you have a bit of a bigger break, not just one karfos, you have two karfos in the middle. Nevertheless, it's still considered a one city, because that's what it originally was. It's one city. It's a remnant of one city. So we can be a bit more lenient in the gap between the two parts of it. So Al Hassam, in the case of this Mishnah, which is further down in the Masechta, about two separate cities, where the etzem is two separate cities, and want to consider it as one city, even though it's two separate ones. Emaloi, I would say no, you can't. Two karfos, you must have a smaller space. Maybe the space only one karfos is the gap permitted between the two cities, and it'll still be considered one city. Okay, the Iyashmi, so that's why it's not enough to say it here. We have to say his halacha over there in that Mishnah about Neisten Karfif Le'ir. The Iyashmi Hasam, if we say that Mishnah, I would say Mishum de Tchiket Hashmishayu, because each city, what's the concept of the Karfif, like mentioned before, is it's a place outside the city, which is really part of the city. It's like a courtyard. It's still part of the usage of the city, etc. So since it's still part of the usage of the city, so and so therefore, each city needs its own usage. Therefore, you need to have two karfos. The area between the two is two karfos. If it's less than two karfos, no. So then this is one city, because they're being mishtamish together. They're using the area together, because there's less than two karfos between two cities. Sorry. By here, where there is no need to use that area, so to speak. So again, what we did say by the two cities, so each city, so to speak, uses this outside area as part of the city. By here, this place was filled with houses, the area in the middle. So the two parts of the city which remain, which were not destroyed, the two outer parts of the city which remain are not destroyed, those parts never were able to use this. So they were quite sufficiently able to live and be there without having the usage of this area, because it was full of houses there. So therefore there's no reason that we need to give them such an extended area for which to use. So therefore we should make the area smaller. So here, when they don't really use up this whole area, I would just put it in such a way, they're not really using this whole area between the two parts of the city, because they were not used to using it, and it's, they used to have houses in the middle. So Emaloi, so then I would say that when you have to have a narrower area for them to be considered as one entity, as one city. And if you have this gap, it's not considered. So that's it. But Tzricha, so it tells you that even that the same halacha applies, that each half of the city has its has this 70, the 70 amas in total of 141 amas. Okay, now we're going back to the din of the keshes. So now the Gemara says, "Kama havi ben yeser lekeshes." So we're talking about the scenario where you have a city in the form of a bow. That all the roads. That's how it is. The city is built in such a way. So we said before that we start counting the Tchum Shabbos if you're walking out of the city. Let's say, so the city is in the shape of a bow, and the person who's walking out from the middle of the bow, the inside of the bow, is walking outside. So outside the city. So we said that we consider the whole area within on the inside of the bow, the whole area on the inside of the bow, we consider it as it's being filled with houses, and as if there is a string which connects the two. Should I call them the two poles? The two outer parts of the bow. And you put a string like you would do it by a bow. So put this imaginary string between the two outer parts of the bow, and anything which is between the bow and the string is considered full of houses. So, so the question is, maybe I can use the word, how deep can that curvature be? In other words, how much distance can there be between the bow and the string that we still consider? I mean, if it's like very deep and lots of a few miles between the center of the bow and where the imaginary string is, do we still say that it's considered filled up with houses? What is the distance between the string and the center of the bow that it should be considered filled up with houses? And therefore, the tchum would therefore, if it's considered filled up with houses, the tchum would start from the tchum would start from where the string is and not from where the houses are. So the kama have a yesel keshes. And I just want to remind people what we learned yesterday that between the two ends of the bow, the maximum is 4,000 amas. So that the tchum from one end of the bow to the tchum, if you're walking from the other end of the bow, would overlap. You would meet. You'd have an inch or tefach between the two, whatever it is, that would overlap. If you have more than that, then the inside of the bow is considered empty of houses. But that's a different halacha, although it might have a little connection. It has more than a little connection, actually. But that's a different halacha which we learned yesterday. So Rabbi Omar says al payim am. Okay, you allow the depth of 2,000 amos. So if the string of the bow is more than 2,000 amos from the center of the bow, then you cannot start counting from the string of the bow. You have to start counting your tchum from the center of the bow. There is an interesting thing over here, which is both in what we learned yesterday and what we're learning today, and that is that if it's considered part of the city, anything which is considered part of the city, it has a din of daled amas. So you don't count it as the distance of walking of the tchum. It's considered daled amas. And the tchum, the measuring of the 2,000 amas starts outside the city. Now, there is a connection being made over here that if those parts, in the instance of the bow, in the case of the bow, the connection is being made that those parts to which you're able to walk because they are within the tchum, so because of the din of a tchum, you would be able to walk. So the moment, so if you're able to walk there, then it's considered part, if it's within the bow area, anything within the bow area, if you're able to walk there, then it's considered part of the city. So just to note, it's like two separate halachas over here. It's the halacha of you being able to walk there based on the principle of Tchum Shabbos. And once you're able to walk there, you say, oh, this is not Tchum anymore. This is city itself. It's not such a question as much as just to clarify that that's how the principle works. Because we do have leniencies in the Tchum. We see if you have a circle, the city is in a circle, we say, okay, let's square it, etc. If you have one house sticking out, okay, we'll give it some extra space, etc. So there is, but so we're using this principle that if you're able to, if this would be the Tchum, and you'd be able to walk there because of Dinei Tchum, then we can, and it's part of this shape of a bow, or so then it will count as part of the city. So we count as part of the city. Just to note, that's how it's working. We're sort of jumping from one concept to another concept. We're connecting the two concepts, which are not necessarily the same, but it's permissible to connect the two concepts, if I can use that type of expression. Okay, so yeah, so we have Rabbi Breder. So Rabbi Ravuna says if it's more than 2,000 amas from the center of the bow, the string is more than 2,000 amas from the center of the bow. So the person who's walking out of the city from the center of the bow. So that's it. You start counting from where your house is. Omar Rabbi Bereder Rabbi Ravuna. Sorry. Omar Rabbi Berei. So I did not Omar. Don't say Omar. It's Omar. So like Rabbi Bereder Rabbi Ravuna Omar. So Rabbi Bereder Rabbi Ravuna says Afilu Yesem Al Paima. It says even more than 2,000 amas. So it's even more than 2,000 amas. The bow is more than 2,000 amas from the center of the bow. It's still fine that you are able to count the tchum from the center, from the bow. That's what it says. It doesn't matter. You can still count from the center of the bow. You can still count the area from the string. The 2,000 amas, whichever distance there is from however large the distance is between the string and the center of the bow, you'll always count from the imaginary string of this keshes. Rabbi says, the svara is like Rabbi Breder Rabbi Ravuna. Why? He says because you've got to realize that that where the bow is, it's always walkable for him. Let's say from the center of the bow to the string of the bow is more than 2,000 amas. Oh, it's more than 2,000 amas, so it's not really reachable from the center of the bow. The string is not really reachable. But that is not true. Why? Because the string is always reachable to the person who is at the center of the bow. He just has to walk a little bit in a roundabout route. He has to walk along this in the city, along the bow. And now we mentioned before, just before we mentioned that the two poles of the bow this is the halacha apply, when the two poles of the bow are within 4,000 amas of each other. So therefore, he is always able to walk across the string. He's always able to the string of the bow. Why? Because he can walk in the city till he comes to the edge of the bow, the pole of the bow, the edge of the bow. And when it comes to the edge of the bow, he can then walk 2,000 amas, and he'll be in the middle of the string. So he can walk across the whole string. And then similarly, he can walk the other way or whatever. So therefore, it's really, the whole area is really reachable for him. So even though the string is more than 2,000 amas from the center of the bow, it's reachable, and therefore it's considered like one city. Let's do it inside. Because you can go through the houses, it means walking across the length of the bow. Okay. Let's go back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says that if you have what houses, when you make if you have houses which extend a little bit outside the city, so if the house extends, so then the tchum will start from where the edge of the houses are. That is more or less what the Mishnah is saying. You make the square. The square you'll make outside the houses, which even though they stick out from the rest of the city, like a square will be based on those houses. So, and he uses the word houses, and it says gdudiyos, gevoyos, asar tvachim, gdudiyos, high 10 tvachim, and bridges, etc. A few things that you mentioned. Now, gedud is sort of a fence, so it's so there's some type of fencing. That's gedud. Okay, my gedudiyos. What's gedudiyos? Some type of fenced area. This means gedudiyos is called when you have 3 fences without a roof. That's called gedudiyos. So that is good enough. It's considered the base dira, and therefore the city extends till that area where they are. Okay, so if you have shalosh mechitzas without a roof, that's considered the base dira. What happens if you only have 2 mechitzas, but you have a roof? This is without roof. You have a roof, so maybe that's good enough that it should be considered the base dira, and we should start counting the tchum from over there. So, Gemara says, Toshma, let's look at the Brisa. Toshma, let's look at the Brisa. Elushim is Abrim Ima. These are which become part of the city. It's Abrim is like it enlarges the city, like a Misabri is like a pregnant woman. She's a bit larger. So these are the ones which enlarge the city. What are the things? What are the types of dwelling places which enlarge a city? Nefesh kever sheyesh be'arba amas al arba amas. A kever means a kever, and there's a building on top of that. On the top of the kever, where the person who guards the kever stays, and if it had that, so that guarding place is has 4 by 4 amas. A gesher, a bridge, also which has a dwelling place on it. A kever means a beis hakvaros. Sheshlam beis dira, beis hakvaros, which has a beis dira for something to guard it or whatever. Beis hakneses, sheyesh beis dira. A beis hakneses which has a bit beis dira. Beis dira lechazan, which has a beis dira for the chazan, because not most beis hakneses people don't live in the beis hakneses, but some beis hakneses have there an extra room for the chazan where he lives. Beis of kachavim shesh beis dira lekumrim, beis of church, whatever it is, which has a beis dira for the galochim. Ha'urves means the horse stables. Ha'otzes shebesada, and where you the granary houses which are in the fields. V'yesh behem beis dira, and it has in it a beis dira. So all these places, yes, but the condition is that those places have to have a beis dira. If they have a beis dira, even though it's not the most amazing beis dira, but nevertheless some of them are not so amazing. It has a beis dira, so that all that enlarges the city. And also in the field you have like a hut, which is for the shomer who sits there and in that hut. So that also, it's in the field. It also is considered to extend the city. Habayis shebiyam. If you have a house in the sea, it means on an island. You have a bit of a rock cropping out of the sea, not far from the edge of the sea, within the 70 amas 2/3. So if it's outside the 70 amas 2/3, then it's disconnected. But within, so you have, say, in the sea, you have a bit of an island sticking out. These all become like the increase the size of the city. You're right. So all these things increase the size of the city. The Eilush Misabrim, and these are the ones which do not increase the size of the city. Nefesh so this nefesh, this is sort of on top of the caver, which is a guarding place where the person to guard it, but it's broken from both sides. This way and the other way. So it's been broken from 2 sides. As it's been broken from 2 sides, then it does not increase the size of the city. So this is, we have only 2 walls. There are only 2 walls, and it does not increase the size of the city. By gesher, by kever she'elam beis dira, a bridge or cave or basic quarters which does not have a beis dira, basic knesses she'elam beis dira, even a basic knesses, but it does not, the chazan does not have a place for chazan to live. Same thing in basic kachavim. Ha'urvas va'itzish besoda, all the above mentioned things as well. She'elam beis dira, but the main thing is they don't have a beis dira. So those things don't have a beis dira, so they will not count and they do not extend the area of the city. Also, a few more things which don't fit. Siach is a square, is round, siach is square. Myra is like a cave-like situation. The gather and a wall, the shoivech, a place where the birds live. That's you make some, what do we call them? These things for the boxes for which the birds to live. All these things don't increase the size of the city. The habayish b'sfina, you have a house, but it's on a boat, so it's not the boat is constantly on the move. It does not have a permanent place which it stays, but therefore it cannot increase the size of the city, even though the boat is next to the city. We do not misaber with the city. The kitzer. So the Gemara takes out what's relevant to our question. This guarding house on top of the caver, which is broken on both sides, and it says it does not consider. It's not considered. It's not considered to extend. It does not extend the city. That does not have the ability to extend the city. It's not considered a dwelling place. My love, the igatikra. Probably it's talking about when it has a roof on it. So what was your question? The question was if it has two walls and a roof on top, whether it extends the city or not. So there we have the answer in this brisa. It's probably talking about there's no roof. So the Gemara says no, like the lekatikra. That it's that the lekatikra that there is no there's no roof. So no, there's no right. The brisa is talking about two walls without roof. So that we've not answered the question which was asked whether two walls and a roof is considered the base zera. Okay, now the Gemara says bias should be yam l'may chozi. The bias in the yam. We said the bias in the yam that's considered, it extends the tchum Shabbos. So what's it fit for? If it's in a bit of a rock there, or sticking out of the sea. So it's a proper bias also lifanes by kelim shebesfina. That it's a house where you empty out stuff from the boat. You unload stuff from the boat and you put it in there. So it is useful, and therefore people do use it because you can load and unload. Well, speaking here about unloading and stuff from the boat, which you put there, and then it's close to shore, so it has an importance. Okay, and you probably have somebody living there as well, taking care of the stuff. Right. Umayra eina misaberesimo. And so we learned in the brisa. It's another quote from the brisa. The Myra does not extend the city. Vatani Zikmar says, "Vatani Rabbi Myra misaberesimo." Rabbi learned the brisa that the Myra, it does extend the city. Amabayek shesh binyan al piha. The Rabbi's brisa, which says that it does extend the city. There's a building on top of the Myra, on top of the cave. And one says, I don't understand. If that's the case, what does the Rabbi say in the Myra is misaberes? The binyan, that binyan on top of the cave, that is what complements and adds to the city. So Gemara says, let's that the binyan itself was too small, and if the binyan itself is too small, and you need the Myra to make it up to the size, so then so the Myra itself not, but if you have a binyan and the Myra helps to make up the size, then it extends the city. Amar Rav Huna said, another bit. Amar Rav Huna said, those who live in the tzrifin are those huts which are made out of the type of vegetation, like made out of lulav leaves and arovas, that type of huts made out of those type of stuff, the straw, etc., that type of thing. I imagine, yeah. So Yoshet Tzrifin, those who live in Tzrifin, ein moedim lehem. So those who live in Tzrifin, you might have quite a colony of quite a number of people who live in the Tzrifin. Yeah, it's not so it says that that's not considered that's not considered the permanent living place, and therefore it's not considered a city, and therefore since it's not considered a city, so each one, wherever he lives, his tchum is going to start from that hut in which he lives. So those huts which are made of this very this light material, etc. So each hut is considered individually, and that's for the purposes of tchumen. And the collection of them is not considered a city. Okay. Masir Chizda asked a question that we see. The question is going to be basically that we see in the Mishkan, sorry, not in the Midbar, but in the Midbar, that they did not measure the tchum from the individual huts. In the Midbar, they were living in some sort of huts and tents, etc., which they were living in, and they were not considered. The tchum was considered from the whole area of the Jewish people, not from their individual huts. How do you see that? Okay, Masir Chizda v'yachna al yardim beis hayeshimis. So there's a pasuk v'yachna al yardim beis hayeshimis. So the pasuk that gives you where the Jewish people were camped, and so it gives you the area where they were camped. So Omar Rabbi Bachana Amr Bechinen. And he said that I saw that place. It was 3 parsa by 3 parsa square, which is 12 kilometers, about 12 kilometers approximately. 12 mil. Each parsa is 4 mil. The mil is approximately a kilometer. So the kitzur, so it's about, so the area of Machne, as we all know, the area of the Jewish camping was approximately 12 mil by 12 mil, 12 kilometers by 12 kilometers. Right. So fine. So we know the size of the Jewish encampment. Now the Tanya will let the Bryce now when the people had to go to the Sherutim, they had to use the toilets, etc. So they did not do that within the Anania Kovet. Anania Kovet's Shechina, they did it outside. They would go outside the Anania Kovet in order to empty the bowels. Right. So it's now when you go outside the Anania Kovet to empty the bowels, where do you go? You go to the front, you go to the sides, you go to the back. Where do you go? So now, since so you never know when the moving is going to start. So if you walk out of the Anania Kovet in one direction, you don't know. Maybe in a few minutes, the Hashem will decide to move, and the Anania Kovet is going to come in your direction, and then you'll find yourself inside the Anania Kovet. So therefore, when you have to go out the Sheraton, which you want to need to be outside that Anania Kovet, so you go to the back. Why do you go to the back? Because you're going to go forwards. You're not going to go backwards. You might go to the side. It's true. You might go to the right, left. You might go forwards, but you're certainly not going to go backwards. So that's the guarantee. So the kids, all the people have to go backwards. So in if you have to go backwards, right? And so therefore, now I can imagine that somebody who lives in the front part of the machne, the front part of the machne. Somebody lives in the front of the machne. So on Shabbos, he has to go to the shed to empty his bowels. He has to go all the way to the back. He goes all to the back. That's a walk of 12 kilometers. Okay, fine. Maybe it's good exercise, but it's outside Chum Shabbos. According to Rambam, Chum Shabbos is 12 kilometers. It's outside, so it's even outside the Reisdige Chum Shabbos. Whichever way, it's outside the Chum Shabbos. Because I said, so they're walking the whole 12 kilometers. So it must be that you're not measuring the tchum from their individual houses. So it must be that you're measuring the tchum from like a whole city, from the edge of the encampment. You measure the whole encampment is like the whole Damas. So it's a kasha. What you said that tents, these because that's what they had. They had these temporary tents. So that's what. So what's the question that we see in the Mishkan, the temporary tents, and nevertheless you counted the tchum not from the individual tent, but from the entire settlement of the Jewish people. Was considered like the Dalad Amas. Rabbi said, "Diglin Midbar Kameras." You bring a question to Diglin Midbar. That according to the command of the Eibishter, they rested. According to the command of the Eibishter, they traveled. The kitzur command the kvilu domi. This concept we have also in the Gemara Shabbos, the Cholofen, that since it's by the command of Hashem they're resting, so now that they're resting, that is choshev. Their resting is considered the choshev, the resting place, and it has the chshivas of a permanent place, even though they're going to be moving. But since it's Api Hashem, it has the chshivas of a permanent place. That is their place. Hashem chose their place, so that is their place, and that is their place. So therefore, it was counted like a city. Right. and can't bring a raya. It's about Mashenkin, other temporary tents like that. They do not count as a city, but they'll only count as everybody has to make the tchum individually. Omar Abchin Barkana, Omar Avashi, Imi Yesh Shalosh Chatzeres, Shnei Batim Hukvu. If you have 3 courtyards of 2 houses each, so then it becomes a city. So you have lots of tents, clays, but if you have that 3 Chatzeres properly built, wood or brick structure, properly permanent structures, and so then that becomes a city. And then even the rest of the so that's good enough to become a city. 3 Chatzeres, 2 houses each. That's not, it's a bit of a gadata. Those who live in the tzrifim and those who go in the desert have this nomadic lifestyle. Chayim and chayim. Their life is not a life. It's a very unsettled life. So the shame of name in Shalahem, their wives and their children are not theirs. What does that mean? Tanya Namahochi. We learned the Braise. Those who sit in the live in the tzrifim as if they live in a cave. They're like dead people. Why? Because they have this. They don't have no protection from the weather. They're settled. So totally, their life is not a proper. They don't have a life in the modern language. So it's like as if they're dead already. The sevel which they have is very substantial, and that's one thing. And and for the daughters it says so my time, what's the reason? Omar Ula, so Ula says because they don't have any bathhouses. So if they don't have any bathhouses, so what happens? So the men, when they go to the bathhouses, they leave the city. So when the men leave the city to go to the bathhouses, which are far away, some people come in, strangers come in, and they're mezana with their wives because there's no men around. Because the women, when they need to go to the mikveh, because there's no mikveh, there's no mikvahs where the desert, this nomadic lifestyle, there's no mikveh, so you have to go far away to find the mikveh, and so therefore, when they go far away from their places, and they call also, they go together, quite a number of women, and there's no men over there, and then they might then meet Yesher. Rashi says Yesher Yosher Roidef Achrei Mumsiachet Imon. So even though there is some Rishoyim who will go, who will be Mesiachet with them, and what's the difference in the 2 reasons? If there's a river next to the where they're living, if there's a river next to it, so then the women don't have to go far because they just go to the river for mikveh. Whereas the men, there's no men chatzos, so therefore the men are going to go far away, and therefore there is still a chashash of znus over there because the men leave town. A city which doesn't have any vegetables, ain't Talmud Chacham B'Shoy Lodova. So Talmud Chacham is not permitted to live there because the yerek is cheap, it's available, and it's good to eat, healthy eating. So therefore, if you have vegetables, the Talmud Chacham, he'll have what to eat, and therefore we'll have enough time to learn. You have to start going look around for food. You won't have time to learn. So that's what. So you have to go to a place where there's vegetables. You have cheap food, available food, and then you can spend your time to do learn. Okay, I think we'll stop over here.